Today's computer problem at Cape Canaveral was distressing, perhaps, but for most Americans, not totally surprising.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of VisionCast. I'm Pavithra. I lead the insurance go-to-market strategy at VisionNet. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of having Mr. Chris Olechowski with us, and we will be talking about the actuarial agility in action. Chris is from Actuarial Resources Corporation, or ARC, one of our alliance partners in the insurance vertical. And he's an expert in the actuarial field. I'm very delighted to have him on our show today. Chris, welcome to the show.
All right, thanks, Pavithra.
Thank you. And our topic for today is actuarial agility in action. Along with Chris today, we'll explore how automation can help streamline the valuation and reporting cycles in the actuarial department. Before we begin, I would like to ask Chris to start with a brief introduction, and then we'll dwell into the conversation. Over to you, Chris.
All right, certainly. Thank you. So my name is Chris Olechowski. I'm the Director of Consulting at Actuarial Resources Corporation and a principal with ARC. I've been in the industry going on close to 30 years, working primarily in the U.S. With U.S. companies. My background historically was with asset liability modeling, but that kind of morphed into my involvement with a lot of the emerging frameworks. And a lot of that work has involved end-to-end automated productionized processes. I think this is a good fit for us to have a conversation here, and excited to be working and partnered with VisionNet.
Thank you, Chris. And as all of us already know, actuarial transformation, automation, and just improving the overall actuarial efficiency is also one of VisionNet's core offerings. So I'm just excited to exchange notes with you and see how the industry is trending towards this topic. Chris, before we dwell into the details, I'd like to begin with a broader question. What does actuarial agility mean for someone who's deep in the actuarial processes on a day-to-day basis? And how does it change your approach to valuation and reporting cycles?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When I think back on my career, actuaries have had to work in a kind of an agile environment for a long time.
Right.
Dealing with things like data anomalies, model issues, and just any, random questions that are posed to them by management. So historically, actuaries have had to quickly adapt in the middle of the reporting cycles. I think where that's changing is where it was acceptable to kind of do things and change things ad hoc. Historically, we're now living in a world where, results need to be produced much faster, and things need to be much more controlled and automated and systematic, and not necessarily easily changed by actuaries in the middle of the process.
Got it. So, Chris, I know your perspective is centered around the life and annuities, subsegment. So, how do you think this trend that you just spoke about is there also a global implication to it? Or is the U.S. market different in certain ways?
Well, I think there definitely are global implications, especially a lot of the reporting regime changes that we've seen have been global, specifically things like IFRS 17. With my focus on the U.S., it feels like there's even a bit more with our U.S. statutory requirements, U.S. GAAP LDTI changes that really has up the bar as far as what the frameworks, the reporting frameworks need to do, and where in the role that automation and even data management needs to play as part of the reporting processes.
Sure. And it's interesting that you mentioned data management, because what we've seen in our work with our clients at VisionNet is a lot of the automation around the actuarial processes involves data foundationally. So in your experience, what types of automation? Is it data validation or assumptions management, exception handling? Where do you think we're able to deliver the biggest impact for your clients?
Yeah, and I'd say it's probably all of the above. And as we kind of preface this, I mean, my view comes from a U.S. life and annuity actuarial standpoint.
Right.
And I go back to all these changes in the financial reporting regimes, whether it's U.S. GAAP, LDTI, PBR, for U.S. statutory, IFRS 17, the economic frameworks, the Bermuda frameworks, and you combine those changes with kind of a push towards a single platform and the need to reduce close times. It's really pushed this need for data management and automation, and it's because these regimes are different than what we would have seen historically. I think a lot of the reporting regimes historically were, you took in-force data, you pushed it through an actuarial model, you got your output, and you pushed that into a ledger. A lot of these changes are much different now. There's a lot of, we have multi-runs, that produce these different sets of output, and then there's processes that need to manage all that different output and do something with them, and do some post-processing and combine the calculations to get that final result. The other thing we're seeing with some of these regimes is, there's a big dependency of things over time. So, like I said to start this section, it used to be this input in and output out. Now it's, well, I need input that's current data. I need input that's data results from prior valuations. And I need to combine that all into producing the results that are fed into the financials. So that data management and that automation is huge. In doing all of that needs to be done, just because there's so much data, there's so many processes, and it's so complex that it can't be done without the automation and that sort of mindset.
Great. Chris, what we have seen is, while many of our clients and insurers and carriers in general have been attempting automation, not all of them are successful. We've seen instances where our clients, before they could engage us, have dealt with pilots in automation, but it hasn't really scaled. In your experience, why do you think this stagnation happens, and what really separates the teams that are able to scale really well versus the teams that are stuck after the piloting phase? What has been, in your experience, the prime reasons behind pilots failing?
Yeah, I guess there's two things. The first being that automation really needs to be ingrained in the culture, and that has to be part of the vision of what the organization is trying to address. Historically, you've got actuaries with this mindset of, I'm so focused on the details of this calculation, but it needs to shift. And where we've seen a success is where the teams have this vision that we're going to focus on the end-to-end automation and the processes, and maybe let up a little bit on the specific details. The second is that, like, these end-to-end systems, when I talk about end-to-end systems, that's everything from the data in the actuarial calculation engine, and then what happens after that. These processes really need to be designed with automation in mind up front, and the thought of, how is this going to work as an automated process? One of the biggest failings we've seen over the years is when things are done with a focus on the actuarial calculation engine first, like actuarial models get designed and get kind of ironed out, and then the afterthought is the automation and how the processes are going to work. So that's where things become a bigger struggle. So going back to the initial point, we really need to have everything we do designed with that goal and vision of automation and how the process is going to function up front.
Got it. And Chris, in your experience, obviously you've had a lot of hands-on experience with your clients. Is there a specific project or initiative where automation meaningfully added value to what you were trying to build? And what were some of the factors that you kept in mind to evaluate the readiness for automation?
Yeah, it's like a lot of things. Sometimes the first things you were involved in, had that special place, in your heart, and they stick with you. And I think back to one of the milestone projects I was involved in, which it was quite a few years ago, but I think that's kind of played a key role since then. But that first project was a focus. It was a large U.S. insurer with a handprint globally, but their focus was on implementing a productionized system for asset liability management. And the thought was they need to have this full process to run models and develop all the inputs and do all the post model calculations, happen in an automated fashion, and essentially spit out without much actuarial manual intervention. And the reason, and that became so big for that company, and they've said that system and that process and all the automation and processes around that allowed them to sustain themselves and weather the 2008 financial crisis. And from them, they became an even bigger organization. So that's something that I think I'm really proud of being a part of. The keys to that, I think, go back to the prior the question we were discussing, where it was really that culture and that vision of this is what they wanted to happen that really allowed that to be a success.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. So Chris, this is clearly pre-AI, right? So there's so much buzz around what AI can do. And I think in 2025, we are clearly seeing a distinction between, the buzz and the reality. So obviously, even before AI, there has been automation happening in this space. What are some of the levers that were used for automation pre-AI? And the case study that you just spoke about is from a while ago. So how did we realize the benefits of automation back then?
Yeah. And I'll first say it wouldn't be 2025 if we didn't bring up AI.
AI, right? Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get to that. But the key is, and the key will continue to be with AI, that actuaries need to partner with their IT focused partners. It needs to be an alignment. It can't just be like actuaries. And I speak from an actuarial standpoint.
Sure.
Actuaries just can't be doing things with the thought of, okay, and now after I'm done with what I've done, I'm going to let the IT professionals do what they need to do. It's always when they are joined together with that common vision and an understanding of what each other needs to do that is what causes things to be successful.
Great. So yes, at VisionNet, when many of our internal and external stakeholders talk about what is it that we bring to the table in the actuarial space, we like to phrase it as bridging the gap between IT and actuarial, because as actuaries, the professionals who are engaged in this space are so highly skilled that I think their time is extremely valuable, and partners like VisionNet can come in to help take away some of that stress from IT related work and automation specific things, related to technology, which we clearly can bring a difference through what we do. And that gives a lot of time back to actuaries to focus on, areas that are critical for the organization. So that's been our experience as well. Yes, and I highly encourage, a plug, but please do reach out to IT partners who specialize in this space so we can take some of the stress away from automation, building automation yourself.
I think one of the keys, Pavithra, like, and as I've gotten to know you in the recent years, and other individuals at VisionNet, whenever you've got these partnerships of people with their specialized skills, what makes a partnership work is this understanding, trying to communicate what you need from your partner, but also understanding what your partner needs from you. So I think that becomes key, and I think as we've developed our working relationship, I think that's shown itself. You can probably also take this as marriage advice too, so that's a whole other topic.
So Chris, we'll now briefly touch upon some of the trends that we are noticing. Based on your experience working with multiple insurers, what broad trends are you seeing across the actuarial functions, and how are they approaching automation?
So, as I've mentioned, we've had all these changes in the U.S. And even globally with all these regulatory changes, and a lot of effort has gone in over the past 10 years into just getting the bare minimum done for day one with these things working. So I think the focus is going to be on the day two of actually getting these automated processes ironed out and working smoothly, so that the financial reporting can be done in a timely manner without much true manual intervention from individuals. So I think that's generally what's going to drive a lot of the technology implementations into these processes, and continue with that.
Sure. Are you noticing a difference in how large insurers are approaching automation versus how small and mid-sized insurance carriers are approaching it?
Yeah, and over the years, there's always going to be that big difference, because the larger insurers have they have more resources to allocate towards this stuff. But it does come back to having resources dedicated to these projects and these processes full time, and not just as a side job for them. And I think historically you've had in insurance organizations, you've had actuaries working in one space, and you have had IT specialists working in another, and they had their full-time jobs. Actuaries had their full-time jobs, and things they were trying to do together were part-time. I think so. The larger insurers have seen that if we have the dedicated resources doing that sort of focus on this stuff, we can actually get it done. It is definitely a challenge for the smaller insurers to have those dedicated resources, because with dedicated resources, there's obviously additional cost to that.
Got it. And Chris, beyond automation itself, are you noticing any shift in how actuarial departments are thinking through their talent model? Because with automation, and the assumption is that with the time that gets freed up, actuaries are able to focus on more strategic work. Are you seeing that shift in progress, or would you say it is yet to start?
It's still shifting. We're not quite there yet, I think, but I think it's also being forced upon us, just because, as I've said, we've got all these changes and things that become more complex. But we've also got, we don't have as many skilled actuarial resources out there working to actually tackle the tasks that need to be done. So it's kind of, we're needing to kind of move away and try and, not get involved as much in the day-to-day aspects. When I started out in my career as actuaries were doing a lot more, in the weeds coding of stuff, and, actuaries maybe aren't the best programmers, but, we would get by. I think it is going to shift towards, not being full-time involved in that sort of coding, and getting more involved in the strategic thinking. And that might play itself well into the AI world, where some of that coding and technology is, rapidly speeds things up and allows actuaries to just really not focus as much on the coding, because they can get some of that, out of, relying on some of the AI tools.
Got it. Let's talk briefly about our friends, the regulators, right? So there's an increased push for transparency in actuarial models and the assumptions that are being made. So, how do you see automation helping insurers in the compliance area? And has ARC had experience in that space?
Yeah, kind of with everything, you design these end-to-end processes. A lot of the controls and things that regulators and auditors are looking for needs to be embedded in the system and designed as part of it up front. And these things need to be automated in such a way that it's just part of what's produced in these processes, that prove that the models have the data that they need, and they're producing reasonable calculations. So if you can design those things and automate those things up front as part of the process, it becomes a little bit more transparent and just part of what you're doing.
Sure. And we've had experience in the regulatory and compliance space as well, where we've worked with some of the insurers who are responding to LDTI, and we've basically helped consolidate the data that is needed for the downstream reporting. So we built the entire data management solution for that space. So yes, and we are seeing an increased need for conversations around regulatory compliance and how IT partners can support that space. Looking ahead, Chris, in the next 3 to 5 years, what areas of actuarial work do you think are ripe for automation? And are there areas that are still underdeveloped today?
It's probably, historically people have done stuff around data validation. I think there's still more work to be done there.
Yeah.
But, exception handling, that enables, actuarial processes to run through quickly on the first time, I think is going to be key. When we look at some of the big areas, you were talking about, LDTI, and we talk a little bit about regulators, but one of the biggest struggles that companies have is even just taking their in-force data from one period to the next and being able to combine that with transactional data that's happened over that period and explain exactly what's happened to that in-force data. Like, well, it's changed by this amount because of, be able to easily explain whether it's because of withdrawals or because of deaths or, new business coming in. I think that's the sort of thing that needs to happen. And the problem, I mentioned exception handling because, or even, in data validation, it's trying to that data that ties those point in time in-force amounts and the transactional data is oftentimes lacking and sometimes missing something. So there sometimes you need to kind of come up to come up with a reasonable explanation as to what's really missing there, and that's where maybe automated exception handling and data cleansing, I guess, is the other topic that can be added there. I think that's probably a big area that's underdeveloped. I'll then say that I explain it from an in-force standpoint that becomes foundational to then explaining, well, why did my U.S. statutory reserve change from this amount to this amount one period over one period, and that's all easier to explain when you've got that foundational information about what's how the in-force has moved from one period to the next.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the more we do with data, the more we find there is to do. I think data will definitely continue to be a priority because it's so foundational to get all the data elements in place before we attempt anything big. Especially with AI initiatives, we are noticing that while clients are eager to make an impact with AI, there is clearly a gap between the data that is needed for AI to be effective versus what they currently have in the systems today. So that space, in our experience, also I think will continue to be the number one space for automation. So, Chris, there are a lot of low-code platforms, machine learning algorithms, and of course AI available for insurers today. Are you noticing how that is influencing automation? Is there more interest around adopting this technology, or do you see the more legacy, hard code automation working well?
There's definitely an interest in adopting some of this. Conversations seem to be happening daily that I'm involved in around this, and it will change the way we work. And I think it's because what I said earlier, that being able to rapidly come up with solutions for some of these challenges that come up randomly, I think is going to be the key. So I think it's definitely there. The low code platforms, I think, is definitely a hot topic.
Sure. And are there instances, what specific areas are these low code platforms being leveraged?
I think a lot right now, it still feels like it's in the infancy, but a lot right now is in kind of the TL tools around the actuarial processes, and just kind of transforming data for how models and other sorts of analytics need it. So that seems like an easy thing to do at the moment, but I think we'll have to get beyond that. Things will move beyond that and get to more complicated tasks in the future.
Got it. So, Chris, in your opinion, in an ideal world, what does a fully agile valuation and reporting cycle look like?
It's probably been a bit too agile in the past, but that's because manual changes would have been made in the middle of production cycles. But I think in the perfect world, it really gets to having kind of being able to deal with exception handling up front before actuarial models are even run, to ensure that they run through to completion without error, so that results can primarily get produced instantaneously and within the reporting requirements that are needed. Some of the issues you might run into when it comes to exception handling, it's like, well, those sort of things, we need to change the mindset, and those sorts of things will just need to be resolved before the next reporting cycle.
Sure. So that brings me to my final question, Chris. Personally, for you, what's the most exciting part of what the future holds for actuarial automation? And what do you think industry leaders should be doing today in order to prepare for what the future is bringing?
So I'll answer it from an actuarial perspective. Yeah. I think a lot of my responses definitely are. But, actuaries have been kind of stuck in the weeds of producing results and not being able to, spend the time on providing the analysis and providing management with kind of the strategic things that they need. I think that gets pretty exciting if we can overcome this hurdle and get the actuaries out of the production of results. I think that's more fulfilling to be thinking of, well, if I do this sort of analysis, will that allow us to make the right decisions from a management level? From a profession, value perspective, when the management in top companies start to see actuaries as those who are part of the strategic direction and not necessarily just another expense in producing results, I think that's where the value out of the actuarial profession will come.
Great. Great concluding the conversation here, Chris. Thank you for your insights. If I touch upon some of the key takeaways from the conversation, I think for number one is there's clearly an industry need for automation. Insurers are recognizing it, actuaries are recognizing it, and there's more willingness to partner with IT, firms to build these automation solutions together. The second is all the interest around data and the challenges we have with data cleansing, data management, and just making sure that the input data for modeling systems is in good shape. That's clearly an area where I think automation will work really well. The third, of course, is around ensuring that actuaries have a clear pathway into more strategic work by freeing up time that would have been spent on manual tasks, right? And fourth, there is an industry shift happening right now, and both large and small insurers are exploring that trend. And the fifth being, while AI is trendy, we are seeing results from it early stage, but there's also a lot of interest around the legacy ways of automation, which still work, right? So thank you for sharing your insights and also examples from your journey at ARC, working with some of the major insurers. What has been, if you had to conclude this conversation, Chris, what is one thing that you would want actuaries listening today to take away?
It's disappointing that I can't use AI to produce a summary for me. That's a topic for
That's coming next.
I think the takeaway is that we need to get data management and automation ingrained in our processes, and we need to look at everything we develop with that mindset.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And to all our listeners, thank you for spending the 30 odd minutes with us today. While you've heard our perspective of how the industries are shifting, what the trends are, we'd be interested to hear from you. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below, or you can always reach out to us. The details will be published when you see this post going live. Thank you.